Hello everyone, I'm Diana Rivas and I'm a student of the Master in English as a Foreign Language for the Universidad Central de Venezuela. And I would like to introduce this syllabus that we were working on for the subject instructional design. First of all, we have to take into consideration the environment in which this study was taking place. The thing is that um, we were studying the interpreters that are currently working on the Martis enterprise, which offers this service of interpretation of medical interpretation to different healthcare facilities. And these care facilities, as hospitals or clinics or outpatient, they are, of course, as we know, currently receiving a lot of Spanish-speaking patients, and therefore they are in need of a service of interpretation, consecutive interpretation. And these interpreters are working virtually for this enterprise in order to offer this interpretation from Spanish to English and vice versa. And in this sense, we carried out research in order to know which are the linguistic skills that are that these interpreters are currently needing in order to make an accurate interpretation. We know that there are different skills. You need to be able to be a cultural breaker. You need to be able to convey meaning correctly. You need to be able to memorize. You need to be able to take notes accurately and to remember what those notes said. And but among all of those skills, we have linguistic skills. We know that this is a crucial aspect of interpreting. This is the heart of the interpretation. You could be able to memorize a whole sentence or two sentences, but you must be able to um, to shift from one language to another, and you need to be able to um, listen, to speak, to sometimes to write, because note taking is important too. But mostly you need to be able to speak, to listen, and of course you need to be able to um, translate from one language to another in a totally quickly, very quickly way. You need to do it right away. So we wanted to know, how are these interpreters doing when it comes to these linguistic skills. And when we carried out the needs analysis, we noticed that we were implementing this questionnaire with a total of seven questions that were focused on, first of um, all of those, identifying all of those linguistic skills and which one of them were the ones in which the interpreters have the lags. And the second one, the last two questions were um, trying to identify which were the ones of the interpreters in terms of education. So when we did this, we basically noticed that the majority of the interpreters that were consulted for this study are facing problems regarding English grammar, medical vocabulary, and general vocabulary. rather than listening or pronunciation skills. So when it comes to the syllabus of this course for medical interpreters, we took into consideration the fact that these interpreters are actually lacking skills in English grammar and medical vocabulary and general vocabulary, and we don't have to focus that much on listening and pronunciation, but in grammar according to their needs. And we also saw that they wanted to have a course in which the next activities were included: role plays of interpretation, podcasts, readings, written interpretation exercises, vocabulary lists, and few grammar exercises. So it is in this sense that our course syllabus, as the result of the needs analysis that we just talked about, that was conducted in a virtual way, of course, for the MARTI enterprise of interpretation and for the virtual interpreters. And we saw that their listening and speaking skills were subjected to evaluation, and therefore those were not as important for them as the grammatical skills. And we noticed that, well, first of all, the audience of the Marty, the audience of this course, it's going to be the Marty's enterprise. That's the first thing, and they are currently active. Those are Spanish and English interpreter that are currently active. And the title of this course will be Mastering Medical Interpretation, English to Spanish. And these interpreters will be having to have a language level of C2 according to the European reference. But of course, we know that they have this level considering the fact that they are working for an enterprise for which they already were assessed. The length of this course will take 14 weeks. It's going to be a completely online course with synchronous and asynchronous activities, and the number of participants would be 12 to 15. And let's say that the estimated starting and ending date, it would be from September 2023 to March 2024. And well, the course description. This course was designed in order to develop and or reinforce the linguistic skills needed in order to successfully interpret in Spanish and English language within a medical environment. And our goal is to guide the interpreter through the journey of consecutive interpretation in both languages and help them master their linguistic skills while internalizing grammar inductively in both language and practicing in groups with the role play scenarios, acquiring new medical vocabulary, and being exposed to different topics and aspects of the medical field. This course will be conducted in a totally virtual way with asynchronous and synchronous activities. It was important to mention that when we carried out this needs analysis, we noticed that our future students, the interpreters, were interested in improving their grammar and in English language, but they were not interested at all in grammar classes, which means that that they are avoiding. There's a reason why, and we would like to study that in the future. There's a reason why they're avoiding or rejecting grammar classes. Maybe they had not totally delighting experience when it came to grammar classes in the past. But then what we saw is that we need to be focusing on practicing grammar in an inductive way instead of making them feel that they actually are um, inside a grammar class, so they can feel comfortable and receptive. And well, the objectives of this syllabus will be the general one, to design a medical interpretation course aimed at interpreters who work virtually as Spanish-English consecutive medical interpreters in order to develop and or master their linguistic skills needed for this activity. And the specific objectives would be to design 5 content units, including concepts, activities, exercises, and tasks, focusing on an inductive grammar style in order to guide the students in mastering their language skills for the medical interpretation field. Secondly, to know the students' learning wants in order to improve their receptiveness to the classes, to employ the use of interactive materials in order for the students to acquire medical and new medical vocabulary and terms for the medical interpretation. And on the other hand, we would have the approach. This approach would be eclectic. It would be a mixture of learner-centered approach, study skill-centered, and content-centered approach. When it comes to the skills, would be mostly working on language skills as speaking, but we are going to be more focused on linguistic skills like bilingualism, code switching, and grammar use, all of those together. So the content organization, this Mastering Medical Interpretation course was designed to be delivered totally online during 14 academic weeks with a schedule including an introductory class, 5 content units, 2 sections for summative evaluations, and a closing section. So each weekly session consists of a class per day of the week, which lasts 2 academic hours of 45 minutes. And also responded to the needs analysis results. Each unit includes 4 lessons aimed at developing one of the main linguistic skills that the students need to successfully interpret in the medical field. So the course also contains the lesson plans, formative and summative evaluations, as well as the resources to be used in each lesson. We'll see. So we, for the first week, we'll have the introductory section, introducing consecutive medical interpretation, medical interpreters' roles, linguistic skills needed to succeed in medical interpretation, and an overview of the course and its goals and contents. And next we'll have unit number 1. We will be organizing these units as the main purpose of this course is to teach inductive grammar. What we'll do is that we'll have a unit for verbal tense. Well, present medical interpretation scenarios is going to be unit 1, in which we will be using, in lesson 1, for example, simple present in medical interpretation. So we will focus for this class on medical interpretation in simple present, and we will be switching from one language to another with the same grammatical tense. And that's what we're gonna do with the following lessons. So lesson number 2 would be the use of progressive present in medical interpretation. Lesson number 3 would be the use of perfect present, and lesson number 4, continuous perfect present in medical interpretation. And that's how we will be dividing this course, as I said before, since we are focusing on grammar in an inductive way. We can notice that we don't have the word grammar anywhere in order to make them feel like this is not a grammar course. This is master in medical interpretation. And for Unit 2, we will be working with past medical interpretation scenarios. And lesson number 1 would be simple past in medical interpretation. Lesson number 2, progressive past in medical interpretation. Lesson number 3, the use of perfect past in medical interpretation. And lesson number 4, the use of continuous perfect past in medical interpretation. Then for this 6th week, we will have summative evaluation about present and past tenses. Then unit 3 would be future medical interpretation scenarios. We will have these 3. And unit 4 would be hypothetical medical scenarios, because we want to work on modal verbs and conditionals. We've noticed that this is something important and we want to include it within this course. And for unit 5, we will be practicing all these scenarios together, practicing the previous scenarios, practicing mixed scenarios. And for the last evaluation, we will have future tense, modal verbs, and conditionals. So we will have a closing session for week number 14, and that would be all. Let's take a closer look to this syllabus, because we want to notice how in detail what will we be doing. So unit 1, present medical interpretation scenarios. The Mastering Medical Interpretation English and Spanish course was designed for medical interpreters who intend to master their linguistic skills needed to successfully display their interpreter's role. This course will provide the students with activities for the improvement of their linguistic skills, taking into consideration the importance of grammar within consecutive English-Spanish interpretation. And this course will be developed in 5 units and 4 lessons. So our learning objectives for this first unit would be to master the use of grammatical present tenses in the Spanish-English language medical interpretation setting. And the specific objectives are to inductively identify the grammatical structures of the present tenses in English and its equivalents in Spanish language. To be able to use the grammatical structures of the present tenses in English and its equivalents in Spanish language in order to accurately interpret within medical scenarios. To help the students acquire new medical vocabulary with the use of the offered materials, and to participate in a safe feedback environment, practicing the learned structures and facilitating a place for students to freely communicate their ideas and discuss them with others. And for our first lesson, the use of simple present in medical interpretation, the skills to be developed during this lesson are, to help the student to identify. They will be identifying, acquiring, and practicing the use of the simple present tense in consecutive medical interpretation. The content, simple present in English and Spanish, and medical vocabulary, words, expressions, and or collocations. The methodology would be, this lesson will be carried out in 2 online sections of 2 academic hours, each through the Zoom platform, where the students will carry out synchronous activities that will also help them to achieve further asynchronous tasks for follow-up. So the teaching strategies for this lesson would be flipped classroom. We will let the student take the leadership of the class. Also, content-based learning. We will be learning by content, of course, medical content, and inductive grammar, as we said. They won't notice that this is a grammar class. And learning activities. What we'll do here, first of all, we will be analyzing and discussing different simple present grammatical exercises together in an inductive way. This means that we will be actually discussing sentences. We will be discussing sentences because we would want to we would want the students to analyze the sentence, to discuss the sentence. We will be asking what kind of things you notice in this sentence. Instead, we will do this instead of going directly to what the grammar is. You know, you see, this is a the past tense of the verb, and this is, we don't want to include grammar that way here. So the students will be trying to identify the underlying grammatical structure with the group, and then we will try to translate it accurately. And we will be using these medical scenarios that I had the pleasure to gather. We will be using these medical scenarios that are enough for this a whole course. As you can see here, there are different topics for the different classes, and we will be trying to first identify and first focus on the present or simple present sentences that we see here, and then we will be analyzing them, as we said, with the group in order to identify the underlying grammar structure. And then analyze and successfully translate the medical terms found within the grammatical exercises. We will be, of course, because it was something that the students pointed out tremendously. We will be, of course, analyzing new medical vocabulary because it is important. We as interpreters, as medical interpreters, we acquire medical vocabulary daily, and that's something we totally need. And that's something that we would totally want to see in a master in medical interpretation course. So you can see we will be having medical vocabulary here, and we will be using also some medication names, and this is truly important, and this is an information that I gathered from different places, and I wanted our students to have plenty of scenarios in which we could see vocabulary, in which we could see or we could also see themes. I wanted it to be separated by themes. Well, we have hypertension, then we have we're talking about medical history, and then we have medications, and then we have other sicknesses, and then we have another thing over here, gastroenterology, medical history. So we will be taking different sentences from these from this guide in order to practice them, and depending on the verbal tense in which they are. And after that, of course, we will be successfully translating those sentences. So if, for example, we see that, let's see that, what is how the doctor, for example, Dr. Harrison asks, what is happening to your child? Well, how can we accurately translate that? What is happening? And then, of course, we will be discussing that with our interpreters. And of course, the medical terms as well. For example, here, he never lasts too long before fainting. How could we properly translate fainting? Seizures. This is very common, of course. How can we properly translate seizures? Days. How could we translate days? And then we will be working on that. And subsequently, we will offer a brief grammatical explanation for the students to understand the structure. And this will go after we did all of this, after we internalize the structure of the sentence without no grammatical terms. But then we will offer a brief analysis in order for them to understand what's happening. So, what kind of strange movements does he make? So, if we are working with this sentence, we will do this with the sentence. For example, well, we have here thus. Why do we have thus? Well, because it's a third person, and we will be analyzing it, but very briefly. And finally, to practice and master the learned structure with the use of medical interpretation role plays, in which the students will take the place of doctors or patients while interpreting into Spanish and English and vice versa, while the rest of the students and the professor therefore offer their feedback. So we have here, first of all, yes, we have here these kind of videos which we found that are very interesting because it is a practice of consecutive interpretation with medical scenarios. For example, in this case is a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, that's the topic. And we can see that they give you time to interpret what the patient and the doctor are saying. So we will be using this as an example. We will be using this as a first practice with 2 students. And after that, we will be letting the other students to offer their feedback. And later, we will be doing that with other students as well. And we have plenty of examples of consecutive medical interpretation here and endless scenarios in order to work with in this YouTube channel, as you can plainly see. After that, we of course will have an asynchronous task. And as the students wanted to listen to some medical podcasts, we found this one that's absolutely interesting and that focuses on different topics as well. For example, in this case is the infectious diseases episode, the Beaumont House Call podcast. It's 25 minutes and it is absolutely interesting because we have 2 professionals talking about this specific topic. And of course, they will be asked to find more medical vocabulary, writing it down and taking it to the class. For the evaluation of this lesson, it would be a formative evaluation. Students will be collectively analyzing grammatical structures, as we saw, and using them for practicing medical consecutive interpretation with the rest of the students and the teacher's feedback. For lesson 2, it's going to be a similar situation because we will be using progressive present in medical interpretation. And everything will be exactly the same, of course, but the materials, as you could see, for the materials, we will have these medical scenarios to practice with, as they are many, and we have plenty of sentences to work with. We will keep using this material for the rest of the lesson, and maybe for the rest of the course, and also we will use in different, of course, podcasts and different role plays, as you can see here. The podcast for the second lesson would be diabetes episode, a diabetes episode of consisting of 31 minutes. And our role play for that class would be consecutive interpreting practice when it comes to the pre-op. So when we are having a pre-op conversation, we typically ask, are you allergic to any medication? Or have you had any problems with anesthesia in the past? And we would do that here. And then we will have that. It's going to be exactly the same as what we did in the first lesson, but we're going to be focusing on progressive present in medical interpretation, and of course different materials and scenarios. And it's going to be the same for present perfect in medical interpretation. We're gonna have our guide of medical scenarios for interpretation. We're gonna keep using these wonderful lists I was happy to gather for this course, and using every sentence we see that would be focusing on that specific tense, in this case perfect, present perfect tense. And then another practice for our role play, it would be, in this case, sebaceous cyst, and another episode for our podcast for our students to find new terms. In this case, the stressed and burned out episode. Very important. And it's going to be basically the same for the last one. Perfect progressive present is going to be basically the same, but again, some other materials. In this case, we would be focusing on strep throat for our role play. As you can see, we interpret there, then the patient keeps talking, then the doctor's talking. Perfect. That's going to be our role play. And then after that, yet another episode for our podcast for the students to listen at home, the flu episode. So I think it's going to be exciting for the students to go into this journey, because you will finally be able to understand some grammatical situations. You will be totally diving into the medical area, which is exciting because you will be going out from your class, then sitting on a chair while drinking your coffee and listening to this podcast and writing down that new vocabulary. And then tomorrow you'll be going again to practice role play. You'll be practicing a role play. You'll be practicing in a free of danger scenario because it's not gonna be real. So that will make you feel more comfortable. Um, and it is also worth it to mention that we would be using this document too in order to practice role plays as well. For example, the teacher or another student will read this, and then another interpreter will be well, one student will read this, then he will read it in Spanish, then he will interpret it in Spanish too, and then the other student will answer and will be interpreting that in Spanish too. So I think we have endless scenarios here to work with, and I think it's going to be very I wish I could actually do this for real. um I wish we could do this for real, because we have a lot of materials here to work with, a lot of vocabulary, and of course we can totally practice and we can totally dive into these medical scenarios without feeling scared of or being in a real scenario with which we would have to be more careful, and maybe that would lead us to some anxiety. Well, I hope you liked my syllabus and my Master in Medical Interpretation course, and see you soon.